Okay, Rich, hey, thanks a lot for taking some time to come in and talk to me today. I know you had some things that you wanted to talk about, and appreciate you giving me some time to help you with those things. How things been going with you out at Ryder?
Good. Things are going well.
Mm-hmm. What, how are sales this year? Looking pretty good?
Sales are good. Company ended in a pretty good place in 15, and as long as the economy cooperates in 16, we should be in a pretty good environment.
Great, great. Are you guys expanding? What do you got going on with the shop there?
Yeah, the sales are the whole company's grown. The company grew by almost 15% top line last year and about 20% on the earnings line.
Right.
And then this year we're forecasted to grow about that pace again through strong contractual sales. So, pending what happens with the economy and and production and industrial progress this year, we'll see how the year goes. But so far, it's been off to a strong year.
Okay, great. Well, now you live around the local area, right?
Yeah, I live in Alpharetta.
Alpharetta, okay, so that's a little bit of a trip to get over here.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you coming over, early before your team meeting
no
to
problem.
talk about this. So what is it you'd like to talk about today?
Well, I think, just to reaffirm some of the things that I've been working on from a professional development standpoint and some of the competencies that I've been working on. And I know we're going to talk about, some of the development areas and, how to stay on pace with them and some of the things to look at along the way. So I thought it'd be a good conversation.
Great. And what did you have a specific goal with that or objectives that you're trying to work on when you're, setting your direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I have through all the development that we've been doing so far with Rumsey, along with, we talked about SMART goals and development areas, and we did the 360, and we've done the strength builder exercises. We've done all of that. Along with that, I have a lot of professional development that I go through at the same time at work, which ties in pretty nicely to what we're doing in the MBA program.
Right, great. So you see a lot of alignment with the program?
Yeah, so far so good.
Yeah. So where do you think you are as far as, before the program, where were you at as far as where that, you wanted to take that, direction setting?
Well, I was in pretty good shape coming into the program because I've had a coach for the last 2 years that's been assigned to me who's from outside the company. So I've had an executive coach that I've worked with he's actually in Michigan, who I've worked with for the last 2 years, and I meet with him on a quarterly basis somewhere around the country. Mm-hmm. We work a lot around professional development, executive presence, and a lot of competencies that I work on along the way. So I had a pretty good framework on what I already had put together coming into the program. But what the program's done is kind of help smooth out some of the edges that I still needed to do around setting the central challenge for the organization, my professional development mm-hmm. plan, some of the things that I wanted to put together to finish out the coaching that I have through work, which mm-hmm. that'll end in the end of 2016. That'll end with him.
Okay. Now you mentioned smoothing out the edges.
Yeah.
What do you think there were some ragged edges out there that?
Oh, sure. I mean, anytime you switch positions, like I did, you're making the shift from a manager to a leader. There's always some edges to smooth out. And the thing that's been very interesting is, leadership is not just a competency that people have when they move into another position. There's a lot of things that are taught along the way. And it's difficult for some people to make this transition if they don't have a coach along the way to help them out through some of the rough patches. And there's things that you have to change when you're going from, a manager to a leader around, being the person that executes on a daily basis to being the person that sets the vision and the strategy of their organization.
Right.
So, setting a central challenge for the organization, for myself and for the organization, was something that I had to spend some time to do with my coach, really to lay out, what's the conceptual blueprint for the organization, and right. professionally, what do I want to accomplish along the way, and then do my professional goals tie to the company's goals and to the strategic framework that we set for the organization. Right. And there's a lot of different ways that we've set that up along the way. So.
Right. Now, how do you feel like that's working for you?
Pretty good. Yeah. Pretty good. We The first part is you have to identify, who do you want to be as a leader, right? And that's how you have to lay that out, and you have to understand, what is the clear direction that you're trying to provide to the organization and to the people that work for you. So,
Sure.
We spent probably the first couple months working on what is the central challenge for me as a leader, and then what was the central challenge for the organization.
Right.
And then you start to work on, what are the two big development areas that you wanted to go after once that was done.
So, yeah, and you've mentioned leadership, a couple times.
Yeah.
So are you pretty much getting a clear definition of, what you think leadership is
Yeah.
in that, and a better definition of it?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. So, I brought with me some of my professional development that I work on that isn't tied to the MBA class.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought the leadership roadmap that I work on. And so the central challenge for me was to be a leader who sets clear direction, provides resources for employees to be successful, and communicates the value of delivering results the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you look at what's the definition of Rich Mohr
Mm-hmm.
in the job, I first had to define what I was trying to accomplish professionally. So if you look at it, it's three main parts, right? Set clear direction. That's a big leadership component. Provide resources for employees to be successful. That's a huge component of what I do. And then communicate the value of delivering results the right way. So as such a large organization that I run, you have to be very, very clear on the goal is to hit the objectives of the company, but to hit it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
The right resources, the right effort put in, and doing business the right way. Because when you have 900 locations, the hardest part of the job is to bring consistency throughout the organization.
Right.
So when you break up the central challenge for me as a leader, there are two main areas that I'm still focusing on, based on a year of feedback. We do 360s and the MBA program, but that's something that I did years ago when I was entering into manager positions and before I entered into a leadership position. And so when you look at through all the feedback through the 360s, and then we also do a lot of we do some SBI analysis, we do some other analysis that brings out leadership competencies, and then I did a 2-week class, it was a 2-week class at FIU around leadership development, where it's an assessment for 2 weeks through FIU to work on competencies. Mm-hmm. After all that's said and done, and you get done working with your coach, really there were two main areas that I was still working on as a leader. The first one was around leadership presence and effectiveness. Leadership presence is not how I'm perceived for the people that are under me, but leadership presence is being able to interact with my new counterparts at the leadership level and interact in your executive presence with the CFO, the CIO, the CEO, and the president of the company,
Okay.
which are the people that I direct report to now. So, and really, from a leadership presence is understanding, who I am and who I need to be in that role, where I'm no longer the person that executes and is the person getting the job done, and more the person that's setting the direction, and understanding how the direction I set for the organization, does it fit in to the overall organization? Because you can't have in the position I'm in where I run a division, I can't have conflicting goals that don't align with the goals of the company.
Right. So now you mentioned presence and effectiveness. Are those two different things? Are those the two things that you're working on, or is that one topic?
That's one. So there's two
Okay.
topics. So leadership presence and effectiveness is one.
Okay.
And the second item was setting direction.
Okay.
Setting direction was, having a consistent way to provide information on how people can do their jobs successfully.
Okay. Now, where do you think you are on each of those topics? Like, say you had a scale, 1 to 10. Are you advanced? Or you think you're right in the middle, or where do you think you are right now?
Well, I think from the tenure of the job that I'm in, if you were asking me the question 3 years ago around these two areas, I would say that I was a 10 in those.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I'm in a different area of the company, I'm at a different level right now. Those are two areas that are new to me, because I haven't had to deal with leadership presence and effectiveness in the audience I'm in.
Okay.
I haven't had to experience that. And setting direction setting direction for my individual team was easy for years. That's how I got to the position I'm in. But now when you're trying to set direction for an entire organization, it's a heck of a lot different than it was before. So I'd say that there's still strengths for me, but those are the two areas that have the most impact to the organization. So those are the two areas that I need to focus on the most and practice with.
So in those two things, how do you, is there anything specific about what's different then versus now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a good example. Leadership presence. The way that was interpreted and looked at before is, how are you perceived by the people that work for you? That's leadership presence at its core. Now, in the position I'm in, leadership presence is about, how am I interacting and how am I sharing information that's relative to the goals of the company. And then it's about learning when to hold your line on certain things and then not hold your line on other things. And I'll give you an example of that. So when you're now at a level where you're all your counterparts are officers and you're direct reporting to the C-level of the company, you're no longer talking about why products won or lost or why an interpretation on a decision was good or bad. It's about finding out if the decisions you made impacted the company at an overall level in a positive or negative manner. And if they did at positive or negative, it's not justifying why they were good or bad. It's understanding what type of decisions could you made that would have changed the outcome of that. That's leadership presence now in my job. Rather, before it was understanding how the decisions you made impacted the division, and then being able to understand what changes could you have made or helped made to change the outcome of that.
Would you say it's more visionary now than specific?
I don't think it's visionary. I think it's more. I think the interaction is at a much different level, and the conversations are at a much different level. So I think you setting the vision of the organization. That's something that we do on an annual basis. So you set the vision of the company. You do that through initiative-based activity. You set it out a strategic plan for 3 to 5 years out, and that's setting the vision of the organization. And you're trying to design goals that impact the vision of the organization. More of what you're trying to do is you're trying to tell the story of what your part of the company fits into the overall strategy of the company. Is it something that's leveraged? Is it not leveraged? Does it add value to the organization? Does it not? How much of an impact does it have? What percentage of earning impact does it have to the organization? Can you leverage the product line? Those are the type of things that you're talking about. And that's why it's hard when you're trying to set direction for the organization. That's difficult when you're doing it at that level versus being at a manager level. Because when you're trying to set direction at a manager level, you're setting a direction for a group of direct reports and a much smaller group that works for you. Setting direction at a company level is very difficult to do because you have to try and figure out. The hardest part of setting direction is trying to figure out how to keep score if you're winning or losing. It's very hard to do.
Right. So now, how about, have you had examples of what things have worked for you and your improvements on those categories?
Yeah. Well, I've seen things that worked, and I've tried things that haven't worked. Things that have worked is, I've always tended to be very initiatives based and scorecard based. And scorecards are sometimes something that's perceived as a dirty word because it's a way to appraise people, and really that's not what we use it for. We have quarterly checkpoints with the organization, and we've managed to design a balanced scorecard for every individual in the organization, from the front line all the way to the senior level. So even to my boss, we all look at our scorecard on a monthly and a quarterly basis, the same way. And though the levels are different, the triggers of execution along the way are very similar. So we have a scoring system. It's really color coded. It's red, yellow, green, blue, typical scoring. But we can get a pretty good indication on whether the initiatives are working along the way by understanding either at a local level, a business unit level, a regional level, or a country level, where the components of the business are working. And
Right.
there's a lot of KPIs that measure the different scorecards. But the hardest part was setting the direction on where you wanted to start with that scoring. So what are the things that are driving the business, and what are the things that are going to impact the business? So when you're looking at, people, customer satisfaction, market penetration, you're talking about technology and process, and then productivity. When you're looking along those initiatives, is designing the touch points of each of those areas that are important to the organization, that people at a local level can understand them and they have impact on how to change them.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also important enough that at a regional and a company standpoint, they're strong enough influencers that change the overall business.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing that we worked on for quite a while and rolled out about 2 years ago, that really helped on setting the direction of the organization.
Okay.
Because it forced everyone to talk about the business on a monthly and a quarterly basis, which was hard. And the initially rolling that out was brutal, because people were uncomfortable talking about, their individual results, their individual region results, or their individual country results on a monthly basis. That's not something that they had done historically in their careers.
Mm-hmm. So what's next for you in setting direction? You have, as we've talked about, your leadership skills and developing, your presence and effectiveness, and then setting, direction.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have these measurable scorecards. Where are you going to go next with this?
Well, I think one of the things is, how do I be more compelling to the organization? That's the one that's always front of mind for me, is when you're sitting down at the kitchen table with a beer and on a Saturday night trying to understand what's happening in your business, and you're trying to take a break from at work, but you're trying to write down on a piece of paper, I'm always trying to figure out what the score is. That's just how I work. So I want to know on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, yearly basis, am I winning or losing the game? And if I'm losing the game, is how do I influence that game to shift the odds in our favor? And I think a lot of that is around setting direction. Comes with probably the biggest piece of that. So I'm continually working on, how do I be more compelling to the organization? And being compelling is being convincing and then backing it up, that everyone throughout the organization gets the same message. And not only do they get the same message, but they understand it, and can they buy into it? That's very difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about things like recognition and reward, and monthly newsletters, and getting the message out, and constantly following up with the front line to make sure they understand what's important to the organization, they buy into it. Can I give them enough skin in the game where they tie into the vision and the strategy of the organization? Mm-hmm. All those things. And then do I set the right vision for the organization, and am I compelling enough to convince everyone that that's the way to go?
Right. So do you have a timeline that you think, where you're going to know where you're at as far as reaching, that level of,
God. I think there's a lot of leaders that are still working on that. Mm-hmm. After probably a long, long career.
Where do you think you're going to be, like, say, this time next week? Is there a specific topic that you're trying to work toward, or specific goal you're trying to, get to by, next week, next month?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I look at constantly checking. Well, it's at the end of the first quarter. I think is probably more of a better time frame than next week. So at the end of the first quarter, I'm going to be able to sit down with all my direct reports, my 18 direct reports that run the company, and sit down and assess on where we came together as a team. Because the company I'm at, what we do, it's a big team sport, and every person is tied to everyone. We don't have a lot of individual contributors. I think then at the end of the quarter, we're going to be able to figure out as a leadership group if we did the right thing by setting the initiatives for the company, and then the development. And actually, my coach will be there. My coach that's assigned to me comes to our quarterly meetings and gives us a lot of great feedback. And it's good to, not to get off topic, but one of the things that's been very useful is having the coach at our directors meeting. You get a lot of external feedback that you normally wouldn't get from someone in your own group trying to give you feedback. So it's good to understand and he'll sit through the meeting and participate as much as he can around, leadership type stuff and a lot around people. But at the end of the day, his main role is to sit back and understand and give us feedback based on what was successful, what was not successful, some critical conversations he has with us around setting direction and leadership presence, and then also around what are some of the competencies that we can work on with the organization. And probably 90% of what he talks around is around the people section of our initiatives, and then the other 10% is around general execution. But yeah, I think really the end of the first quarter is going to be the first time where I'm going to be able to sit down on a piece of paper and figure and score myself whether I've been successful or I have a heck of a lot more work to do.
Okay, great. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think that was a good talk.
Okay. Well, hey, I was glad to help you with that, and if I can help you again, don't be afraid to give me a ring.
You got it. Thanks
a lot.
You too.